Welcome back to Inside South Florida. The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has some local events coming up that'll help you get some exercise and help them raise money for their cause. Here is Robin Cartwright to tell you all about it. Robin, great to see you. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's just kind of start with the basics. For people who don't know, can you explain Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis?
Sure. They're both inflammatory bowel diseases, and they're very unfortunate to have, as you can imagine. While they're very similar in a lot of ways, they're also different in very specific ways, which is why we have two different names for them. Ulcerative colitis affects specifically the colon or large intestine area, where Crohn's disease can affect anything from the intake of food to basically the outtake.
Right. Symptoms, things people should look for if they think they might have these?
Sure. Symptoms can be anything from unfortunate bowel movements, digestive issues, but then a lot of people exhibit other issues that are related to the diseases that they may not necessarily correlate. So it could be something like a low-grade fever, could be some rash symptoms, painful stomach, it could be painful to eat in general, and then working with the right physician who can help you diagnose those symptoms can help you find out truly what might be the problem.
We're going to talk about the foundation in a minute. If someone has Crohn's or colitis, what is the current level of treatment?
The treatments vary from patient to patient. We have some who do biologic treatments where basically they receive an infusion to help their treatments and put them in what we call a state of remission. We also have other patients that are very lucky that can be treated with strictly diet.
Okay, and then when you say diet, what kinds of things should you be eating, or are they eating?
It's really what they should not be eating, and again, it varies from patient to patient. We have a lot of patients who experience gluten-free diets that have a lot of success with it, but they do that in combination with other things, as well as stress management and medication.
All right, so let's talk about the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. You're wearing the shirt.
I am, this lovely shirt.
A big part of it. Tell us about it.
The Crohn's and Colitis Foundation is primarily volunteer-driven. Our office for Florida is actually based out of Boca Raton, and so we help service the patients in the South Florida area.
And what's your role?
My role is the walk manager for Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach.
Okay, walk manager, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach. Perfect. You led me right into my next question. There are some walks coming up, right?
There are two big walks coming up this spring season. We have one on April 18th that will be at Aizer Park off of Las Olas, and then that starts at 9 a.m. with the walk actually taking place at 10 a.m. And then we have one in Miami at Bayfront Park on May 2nd. Registration also at 9, walk at 10.
Is there any difference between the two events?
Other than the obvious geographic location.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
You know, they're primarily for the same reason. We try to cater to the crowds that will be attending each event. So in Fort Lauderdale, it's really heavily kid populated and kid attended, and so we try to make it as kid and family friendly as possible. We'll be having a field day this year, so register your teams who have a good sense of humor and who are good at sports. And then in Miami, we'll be doing something completely different. There's a different walk manager who runs that one, but it'll be a great event regardless.
You know, with these diseases, because we've interviewed people in the past on this show and who've talked about Crohn's and colitis, and I know that there is an unfortunate, you know, sort of a stigma or an embarrassment, right, when you have these diseases. So people who go to these events are surrounded by their peers and people have things in common with. So that must be a nice benefit, is that you get to meet other people who understand what you're going through.
Absolutely, and we encourage our patients and their families to attend, not just for the fundraising aspect of it. Obviously that's important because 82 cents of every dollar we raise goes to support our mission, but we do it for the support that they can have as well. If I can give you an example,
Please.
if that's okay.
Yes.
In West Palm, we had a young man, Noah, and his grandmother had signed him up for the walk, and she was insistent that he was coming. He was just diagnosed, and he was so embarrassed to be there, and it was just, he's 13, it's painful to be 13 anyway. And she insisted that he be there, and we made a point to introduce him to other children who are diagnosed as well. And since then, I got this wonderful note from his grandmother that said that they've been texting and he feels more comfortable. He's actually applying to go to camp this year, where every kid at camp has Crohn's or UC, as do the counselors. And so you're not embarrassed at that camp. You zip line, you canoe, you do all these great things. And so we're really finding that he's finding his way regardless of what he's dealing with.
Because you mentioned earlier to me, when I asked you about diet, you mentioned a stress component too, right? So surely it has to be quite stressful to be going through this, you know, and be embarrassed to have to use the bathroom or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you can diminish the stress level, that has to help patients, you know, feel better and do better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's with any illness. The greater the stress component, sometimes the greater the symptoms and the greater the ailment.
All right, so if people want to get involved, become a sponsor, take part in the walk, how can they do that?
They can contact our office at 561-218-2929, and they can ask for me. They're more than welcome to, and we'll get them to the right person.
Is there a website that people can go to as well?
There is. There's a national website, which is ccfa.org, and then there's also our local Florida site, which is ccfa.org/chapters/Florida.
Okay, that's not actually too confusing.
It's not too confusing.
I think it's
no.
easy enough. And if you got tripped up, Google. It's amazing. You can find anything you want on Google. And the people who are marathoners?
We also have a component for people who are diehards for running and things I don't do.
Right.
But we have a group called Team Challenge, and what they do is they do marathons and half marathons across the country. We pick about 5 every year, and they raise money, and then they travel to these different sites. And at the West Palm Beach Marathon, if anybody was there in December, you would have seen our runners in their Team Challenge orange singlets run. We had people from all across the country. We had about 100 runners there that day.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was great.
There's an educational seminar coming up as well?
There is. That one will be in Boca, and that will take place in November, and those are free for anybody to attend. We usually have it's a very well-rounded, diverse program, but we usually have somebody talk about diet and nutrition. At this last event that we had somebody from Scripps with the research component side of things talk about the great advances that they're doing in diagnosing the gene, so we can hopefully put people into remission ahead of time before symptoms even happen. And then sometimes we have a stress management piece of it. Sometimes it's acupuncture, sometimes it's therapy. We'll have somebody who's an expert come in and talk about those things also.
What advice would you give someone who's watching now who feels like, either they do have these ailments or they think they might have these ailments, but as we've talked about, they're embarrassed, they don't want to come forward. What would you say?
I think the first thing is trying to get over your embarrassment, as difficult as it can be, and telling your doctor about it. And if you're a child or have a child who has these symptoms, making sure that they're being as honest with you as possible, because children always feel like they want to fit in and they want to be like everybody else.
Right.
So I think first and foremost is getting beyond the embarrassment. There's 1.6 million people who are afflicted that we know about. There's about 70,000 new cases every year. So it's out there. We know it's happening. And through all the different factors of diet, stress, genetics, there is always a chance that you have something that can be easily addressed and managed.
All right, so you mentioned genetics, you mentioned stress and diet. Is anyone more prone to get this than anyone else? Men, women, old, young?
No, not necessarily. Most people are diagnosed by their early 20s more often than not. There are some people who are diagnosed later because they don't recognize the symptoms or they haven't dealt with them necessarily. Some people can be in remission for years and have another flare-up. It really just depends.
Wow. Okay, before we say goodbye, give us phone number and website one more time.
Absolutely. It's 561-218-2929, or they can go to ccfa.org/chapters/Florida.
Okay. Good to see you, Robin.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with all the events coming up.
Thank you.
And come back and hang out again, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
You got it.